All right, hello everybody, and thank you for checking out our speed paint. This is the Volume 5 cover for the latest Dreamkeepers graphic novel. So, I'm David. I'm the author with Liz and also the artist of this. I'm the one you see drawing here and painting. So, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what went into the production of this cover and what I was thinking when I made it. Hope you have a good time. Let's see. So, first of all, this is volume 5 of the series, so if you look, there's kind of a progression. Volume 1, we have a lot of the same elements, the logo up top, the same basic placement of items. But each book, there's like a little central illustration, and in Volume 1, it started in a small little boxed-in area, and each graphic novel, it expands just a little bit. Volume 1, it's a little box in there where you see the characters. Volume 2, the box starts to get more of an organic shape to it. It's got a little bit of an archway on the top. And then volume 3, we're expanding out past the box. It's really becoming large, and all the way up to volume 5. And this is the first one where the characters just splash out across the entire cover. But I didn't want them to necessarily be all using the same style, because if you have a cover that's just full of, full color, fully lit characters, it can kind of start to look a little bit like too much color, too many different things splashed around, too bright. It doesn't go together. It's not really cohesive. And I still want people to look at this and see, a cohesive color scheme that's really unified, so it looks like a good, well-designed book cover just on its own. So the strategy we went with for that was we had the central characters, and I wanted to pick some characters that we haven't seen on the covers in a while. In fact, Bast and Kaylee, I don't believe they have ever been on a graphic novel cover. And Nama, she was on volume 1, but she was just one of the whole group of characters there. So I really thought, these characters haven't been seen on covers at all or in a long time. And in volume 5, they get some of the best moments in the book. We have Bast really cutting loose with his power. Kaylee sort of, she's been in a fugue state most of the series previous to this, so she's just awakening to things. And then, of course, Nama is coming into her own in terms of conflict with Mace and trying to sort of impose how she thinks that he should be treating his self-perceived destiny. So since they have some major roles in the story and they haven't been featured on covers a lot, I thought, yeah, center area is going to be Bass, Nama, and Kaylee. And those are more the focal characters of this cover, and so that's why I wanted their art style to pop a little from the whole surrounding area. So behind them, larger and in a different penciling style, is some of the more adult characters. We have Igrath, Sinter, Tia, and I deliberately went with a different style for them because I wanted them to look more illustrated, a little more static, a little more like, like they're not jumping around and animated. Typically, if the character has nice sharp lines and there's not a whole lot of shading or cross-hatching, it tends to make them look more animated because that's more how animation looks. There's less detail dragging things down. It's easier to make things move. It's easier to draw a million frames of it. So when you see a character that has like cross-hatching everywhere and intricate shading and detailing and all these things, it looks cool, and it also tends to make them look a little more static, a little less animated. So I used that stylistic differentiation deliberately to make sure that we didn't get all the characters just sort of melding together in a big mess. Instead, we have a clear differentiation between here's the foreground characters in the center, they're the focal characters, and then the other characters, they have a lot more detail. Maybe they look a little more, I'm not sure what the term is exactly. They look a little more heavy, a little more static, a little more imposing, but they're kind of embedded in the background more. So they're almost a frame, and they work as a frame too, compositionally. I drew them separately on different pieces of paper, but of course, I had this thumbnailed out in advance, so I sort of had an idea of how they were supposed to overlap. And yeah, Igrath and Sinter, especially down there, they really work as framing elements. They're supposed to be in the background and Sinter in the foreground, technically, sort of circling around and becoming the backdrop for the primary focal characters. And I'm pleased, especially with the result of how that kind of worked out, because not only are they framing the focal characters, but we have that nice strong arch of Igrath's wing and a nice loopy curve of Sinter's tail down there. And not only do those things bracket the central focus, they also serve to be sort of a dynamic element that helps swoop your eye and lead it around on the page. Because that's one of the nice things if you have a fun composition, is if you can get something in there that's a little dynamic and it helps like lead the eye around, it just kind of turns into more of a playground for the viewer to look at. So we have them as framing elements. They have nice dynamic sort of shaping characteristics, but at the same time I used a lot of cross-hatching and fine pencil work to make them seem a little more static, a little more stable, a little more like background elements. And as the coloring progresses later, you'll see we take steps to push them even more back in terms of having them be, essentially a part of the cover, not necessarily popping out as characters that are really in your face. So that was the drawing process behind the big background characters and the foreground characters, and even the background characters. You can see back there, I drew some literal setting elements. There's some ships and lighthouses and other things from a new setting that we get into in Volume 5. Previous books, we've seen a lot of Andaruna, which is the main setting so far. We've seen some of Bralgu, the Nightmare's hometown, essentially. We've seen, the streets, neon knives, the CCA, the tower, the archives, that cave system down there. But this is moving farther from Andaruna, I think, than we've ever really seen, with the possible exception of Bralgu. But in terms of farther from Andaruna, where you have other Dreamkeeper settlements. So that's why I think one of the chapters in this is titled Exodus, is because the characters are actually, they're getting out there and they're starting to explore the world a little more, which I'm excited with, because we've been looking forward to this development for quite a long time. One thing I should note about this Volume 5 cover as well, Volumes 1 through 4, in addition to the characters kind of busting out and exploring a little more, Volume 5, we have changed the format for the series. Up until now, Volumes 1 through 4, it was a traditional comic size, 6.6125 by 10.25 inches. And that was good because, we started out, we had I can't really say very little budget. We had nothing. We started with nothing. So it's like, okay, well, we can do print on demand to get our books in people's hands. And one of the things that you could do with print on demand was standard comic size. And we thought, okay, that's good enough for us. We're going to move forward on that. But the series has been progressing. People have really been getting into it. And I think one of the main appealing things for people is the scope of the setting. They like the characters, they like the adventures, they like the action and the intrigue, but also just we've been getting more and more into drawing detailed backgrounds. I guess you could call it background porn, but I think it's important for our series in particular that people can really kind of get a feel for what it's like to be there. I want this fantasy setting to be immersive, and you look at a scene, I want people to be able to almost hear like the water lapping at the docks, or like smell what's coming in off the breeze. And so I want it to be immersive. And so with Volume 5, Vivid Publishing is really, we're kind of stretching. We're growing quite a bit. The artwork and the books is growing. So I thought this is kind of a transitionary book, especially since we're going to be having the Volumes 1 through 4 omnibus alongside this. If there's going to be a chance to change up the format of the series, this is the chance. So we decided to take it. We are upscaling to 8.5 by 11 size for the graphic novels. So Volume 5 is the first cover that is at the new size. And because it's at a new size too, I decided to go in and even change up some of the detailing on the cover elements. And by that I mean like the little corner pieces, the vivid clasp that's off to the right, the hinges off to the left. Because we've been using the same elements for that we had in Volume 1, and I like the consistency from book to book. But again, those are drawings from like I think 2005, 2006. And if we're going to be upgrading the whole series, it's like, you know what? I think we could level up even these accents on the cover. So I got in there and did some more serious graphite work on these corner pieces, that Vivid Publishing hasp, and I added some little half moons to the hinges on the left because I thought, hey, why not just make them, they can be decorative, but let's also just start hinting a little bit at sort of like the content and the angle of the series. So we went ahead and did that. And also another thing we're doing is we're changing. And this might even come up some in the painting aspect later if you look at it. We're changing from Photoshop to Clip Studio Pro because, I don't know, I really like Clip Studio Pro. We're also doing more animated content for some related projects, and that was helping a lot on the animation. So Clip Studio Pro, one of the big things I was kind of a little concerned about moving to it was, I know at least presently it doesn't have very powerful tools when it comes to font. You can't really warp the font, and on top of that, what else is it? You can't really have layer styles. It has some primitive things like add a stroke, but in Photoshop you can, bevel emboss, texture emboss, drop shadow, inner shadow, all those things you can do in Photoshop to really help make like logos and text pop a little more. And those tools aren't available in Clip Studio. So, but I don't know. Sometimes I want to try something new, so I just figured I'm gonna, we got the same fonts we always use. I'm just gonna jump in and we'll see what we see. So I jumped in and I found out that there's some pretty easy ways to replicate those effects. Like even for the volume 5 text on that little like image plate that I drew, like the cool piece of wood with the rigging coming down. But it's like I wanted it to look sort of like it was inset in the wood, so I wanted a little bit of an inner shadow. But what I was able to do was I just took the text layer, I duplicated it, um, turned it. What did I do? I selected the inverse, then I filled that all in as black. Then what I did with the inverse black area was I feathered it a little bit because I didn't want it to be totally sharp. I wanted it to look a little more natural. I feathered it a little bit and I offset it by a few clicks so that way it wasn't like dead center. And then I just used the original text layer as a clipping layer. And that way, the shadow area would only show up inside of the original text area, and it got the inner shadow effect that I wanted. And same for sort of bevel and emboss effects. Effectively, I was able to take the stuff that Photoshop can do with layer styles, and just manually kind of fake it in Clip Studio. And the process of faking it was a little easier than I thought. And also, since I was doing that manually, it gave me a little more control over exactly how I wanted things to look. I was able to get some more textures here and there, and especially in the Assassin's Flaw text down below, I was able to. Um, I mean, I guess it would have been faster to use a layer style, but I was able to go in like manually and like paint a little bit extra here and there where I wanted to. So just getting in there and like being able to fine tune the details kind of for me offset the fact that they didn't have those built in as an automated feature. And at the rate Clip Studio is going, I would not be terribly surprised if they start adding some of those features down the line anyway. But for me, for someone where I was specifically thinking, hey, am I going to miss some of these layer styles? Um, no, once I got in there and started working with it, I was just fine without those. So I would say Clip Studio has been good to us so far. And so I guess now I'm kind of talking about the coloring process. We've moved past the pencils. So yeah, let's talk about the shading and the coloring strategy for this cover. Again, I had to sort of base it off the previous books because if you have the graphic novels and a bit of a lineup, as people are collecting them, you don't want to have like, oh, this book is blue and the next book is blue and the book after that, unless you want to have every color, unless that's a feature of the series, is a very very consistent color scheme. But we sort of wanted to have a lot of variation in our color scheme, and then the consistent feature is like the formatting elements and the Dreamkeepers logo and all that stuff. So first we had, with first book we had some dark blues and intense oranges. Then we had red and like a just bright, bright glittering blue. Volume 3 was green. Volume 4 was purple. So one color scheme that we didn't really have yet was something where you look at the overall thing and you get like lots of warm tones, maybe some yellows and oranges and some tans and paper tones. So I thought, you know what, Volume 5, that might be a good one to bring in that color scheme, and then we can offset that and have the accent color be like a nice teal, like a nice sort of aquatic teal. And to me, the aquatic teal kind of calls back to the maritime nature of North Havenville, which is the city that they go and discover. So that was the color scheme, and I was set to work. And the main objective was I wanted to get those colors conveyed, and I wanted to make the foreground characters pop the way they were drawn to pop, and I wanted to get the background characters to not look so monotonous, get a little bit of interesting stuff going on, but still have them fade back. So, and in fact, one thing that I really decided to make pop, and I liked that a lot, was some eye colors. Like Cincher's goggles, he's got these neon green goggles. I decided to just fully break the pattern and have those be green and chromatic, and I really liked that because it made them stand out and it was just interesting and pretty. I put a little bit of that into Tia, and Agrath, you lose. I can't pretty up your eyes. I'm very sorry. So, but we got those pretty bright eyes on Cincher and Tia, making them pop a little more. I put a little bit of color on Tia's Troika logo on her shoulder because the different factions really start to come into their own in this book, I think. I put a little bit of a color difference in Igrath's eye patch and beak area. So just making them look a little more solid. So it was less like they're just straight up, here's some pencil art. And, this way it looks maybe more like it's like a photograph that got sepia toned or something like that. So I did that. I had everything looking very warm, and especially with the warmth, I realized if we're going to have Bast as a central figure back there using his power, yeah, we can just turn the knob up on the warm colors, and it's going to look sort of intense and fiery. And so we just like went with that and started having that background area around Bast be intense and fiery. And in fact, I thought of that as being kind of like the source of our warm color scheme here, because Bast, he's always been sort of a little rough guy, but his power really starts to come out in Volume 5, and he's one of the more powerful characters in the series. So the warm tones, they started sort of turned into a lighting thing, and I tried to get the effect of almost some streaky lighting coming down from the right side, like behind the vivid logo, behind the title elements, and put some glimmer on the water because part of the setting is like drawn in as like water back there receding into the distance. I wanted to put some glimmer on that, and so even though we had these characters that were dominating and swirling around, I wanted it to still feel like there's some atmosphere, there's some depth, there's some environment and setting, and putting some streaky light in there. That always gives the idea that, oh, maybe you're like in an attic and you can see the light shafting through the particles, or not even an attic if it's something's a little bit foggy, if there's a little smoke, even if it's a little on the humid side. So just having that implication of streakiness, that to me I thought helped add a little bit of atmospheric stuff to it. And then I added even a little bit of that logo, the vivid clasp. Usually we have that keyhole glowing and being intense and colorful, and I just let a little bit of that light bleed down and go with the streaks because I thought that accentuated things nicely. Let's see, what else were we doing with the color? Well, towards the end, I was pretty happy with the whole thing being like, oh, here we go. It's big and warm everywhere. Then we got the teal highlights. Um, but it was starting to look, I don't know, it just wasn't quite there yet. So I got a second set of eyes on there. And then we realized that we could probably make the warm colors pop even more if we just brought in some neutral and some grayscale in the background areas. So I went in with some additional adjustment layers, just took down the saturation, took down the lightness, and I think that really started to give it even more of a kind of a mysterious tone on the figures in there. Because I did want Igrath and Sinter, especially, to start feeling almost a little ominous in the background there. Because this is also a book where the conflict between those two characters, like, it's an old conflict, but we haven't really seen it in the series before. They've been working together pretty well up until now, and then some things happen here, and just they're like these large, imposing, almost patriarchal figures, representing different values. And this is a book where some characters are literally going to get caught between those two sets of values, and the action heats up as a result of that. So that's another reason that I wanted to use them as big kind of background bracketing elements, because when it comes to the storyline, a lot of the current circumstances that these, the main characters, the kids, they find themselves in this adventure, and a lot of it is set up because of the actions of these older characters and the plots that they've had in the works for quite a long time. So I can't exactly, explicitly state all that right in the cover art, but I wanted to sort of give a feel for it, and then that puts the reader hopefully in the correct mindset going into the book, and it just clicks and enhances the experience. And yeah, so that is what I was thinking when I was drawing and painting the cover for Dreamkeepers, Volume 5, Assassin's Flaw. And if this video is coming out at the right time, you might be able to jump into our Kickstarter or watch for our Kickstarter to start, because that's where we're going to fund the printing. So yeah, if we have a Kickstarter live, we'll update the link in the description. So look for the Dreamkeepers Kickstarter, dreamkeeperscomic.com, Volume 5, and you'll be able to jump in and have your own copy of this, plus the Volumes 1 through 4 Omnibus we're putting into this campaign as well. And the Omnibus, that's why I'm upgrading the cover format. I wanted the Omnibus to be 8.5 by 11. So if you're new to the series especially, this is a good time to jump in, get everything at the new upgraded format, and see just what the story is all about. We've got some more time for the speed paint, so I think I'm just going to talk a little bit about the whole process behind Dreamkeepers, kind of how we got started with it, where we've come from, some of the challenges that we've overcome along the way. There's some pretty fun ones, been hit by a truck, everything lost in a fire. We'll get to all that, but so I guess the origin of all of this, I mean, I really started doing comics at a pretty young age. When I was 12 years old, I made my first comic, which was Tech War. And that was just, fortunately, my parents didn't mind that when I was stuck in church on Sundays, I would just draw while I listened to the sermons. And that's where Tech War came from. And I just kept on making comics. I think by the time I got into high school, Tech War had like 7 issues, one of which was fully hand painted in acrylic paints and stuff. And so I don't know, I just really got into comics and liked making them when I was even a little kid. And that led me to make probably what I would consider to be, um, on balance, a life mistake, which is I went to art college. That was super expensive. Now, I don't want to say it was a total mistake because I met the love of my life there. Like, me and Liz met at art college. We really hit it off, and here we are. We're together and happy, and we're doing artwork with each other. So that was great. But that's not exactly, supposedly the point of art college. They don't put a tuition on there and say, "Hey, you're going to meet the love of your life. That's what we're selling." It's like, no, they're supposed to be selling, you know, training and improvement in your skill and mentorship and career opportunities. And I mean, I can't say there was nothing, but if someone told me now, "Hey, do you want to spend 4 years on busy work and get taught by people who, generally speaking, like 90% of them are teaching because they couldn't hack it in the real world." And yeah, so you're going to spend a lot of time on kind of pointless projects. You might learn a little bit, not as much as you would have learned if you just, looked at YouTube videos, but you might learn a little bit here. Also, that'll be upwards of $100,000. How about that? If someone gave me that bargain now, I would say, no way. $100,000 is worth quite a bit. It's worth quite a lot. But high school me, I didn't quite understand that. I think my generation was still sort of figuring out that college is not what it used to be. Back in the day, you go to college and then you get a career and there's a career path, but we don't need to get too much into that. Let's just say I went to art college, and by the time I got done with art college, I was maybe a little wiser for the experience. In fact, one of the things that was probably worthwhile there is towards the end of it, I was developing Dreamkeepers as a TV pitch because I got technically the idea came when I was in art college. One of my roommates would have constant nightmares. They just have like these nightmares that would torment them on a regular basis. And so one day they woke up and they were talking like, it sure would be cool if there was like something that would guard my dreams from all these terrible nightmares. And that idea seemed like it was kind of cool. So Dreamkeepers was originated with that little gem of a real idea, which was nightmares. Hey, wouldn't it be cool if there's something to fight against those nightmares at night? And from there, I picked up a lot of books and tried to do a lot of reading. Like I read about dreams throughout history and in mythology, and there's a lot of Mesopotamian stuff about dreams, which is where a lot of the names and the nomenclature comes in. So a lot of research, but by the time I was in my senior year of college and I was developing, my thesis and all this stuff, one of the things I wanted to do was, yeah, everyone has that dream of, oh, I'm going to have a cartoon show. So I was going to pitch it as a cartoon show. But we had one person that was a visiting, I guess, a manager, business guy from Hollywood. And he came in and sort of talked about the pitching process and how you do it and what the results you can get are. And the general stuff he told us was that if you go and you pitch a show, you can expect to have zero creative control over it. Basically, if the company you're pitching to liked your idea, they would take it, it would belong to them. And if you're lucky, maybe you'd work on it in some nominal capacity, but that generally speaking, especially for like your first few shows that you create and sell for not that much money, by the way, don't expect any creative input. That's going to be taken over by someone else. And maybe if you put in your time, if you go there and you let people exploit you for a decade or two, at some point it might pay off and you might get your name on something. And I don't know, that sounded like a bad deal, especially because I really liked the idea. I liked the concept of Dreamkeepers. We were developing the characters. I spent the whole summer drawing up the original designs for Mace and Lilith and Nama and all of them. And so it wasn't something that I wanted to just sell to somebody so they could make a terrible version of it. I mean, that's sort of part of why I even got into the art stuff and wanted to go to art college was I was like, hey, there's a lot of stuff out there that's not done too well. So obviously, if I think I can do better, that's what I want to do. I want to go make stuff that's better. And that doesn't really happen if you just like sign your name on the dotted line, take a check for like, $7,000, and then someone else makes all the calls on your show and does the voice casting. Because, oh man, it is so easy to mess up a cartoon with bad voice casting. It's one of those things where if you like, it's not an issue if you're reading a book. If you read a book, the voice is always perfect in your mind because your imagination is filling in the blanks of exactly how you think it should be. But when you go to turn on a show, if there's a voice there that just really goes against the grain of what the character should be, it colors everything. And especially my personal thing, and that there's different styles of voice acting that work for different projects. But the thing is, every single cartoon on TV I heard, it sounded like it was the same 10 or 20 voice actors, just like over and over and over and over. And they were so typecast. And plus, all of them used sort of the cartoony style of voice acting, which is good for a show that has a really cartoony feel, like an Animaniacs or something goofy and zany and Warner Brothers. But that's not really the flavor I wanted to go for. So if someone else was running the show and suddenly we had characters sounding like this, oh no, it's the nightmares. I think I would want to shoot myself in the head if that's what the characters sounded like. I wanted some voice work that was a little more grounded in reality. And just already if I'm getting that opinionated, I knew I didn't want to hand the reins off to someone else or some other creative group. I wanted to make sure that I had creative input. And so when I realized that I probably wouldn't be able to get that selling the idea, I decided, okay, I'm not going to sell the idea. How can I get this out there to people sustainably in a way where I have zero budget? We'll get to that. But what can I do to get this idea out there? And the obvious answer was comics. Because I'd been making comics since I was a little kid anyways. So I knew I could do that. So I decided on going with comics, and I got to work right after graduation on Dreamkeepers Volume 1. I worked pretty hard the first year out of college. That was like 2005 I graduated. And by the time early 2006 rolled around, we had Volume 1 pretty much done, and I was contacted. I actually signed with a different publisher because I was like, okay, I got this comic. I'm going to pitch it around to comic publishers because that's what you do when you have a comic. Obviously, Hollywood is a little bit too much to reach for and expect creative control, but you pitch it around to comic publishers if you want to make a comic. And so I tried that. Of course, we got rejected a lot of places, which is to be expected. I kind of figured there'd be about a 10% success rate, sort of like any process of applying for a job outside of college. You got to put a bunch of applications out there, and the goal is if you're doing a good job, maybe you'll get a 10% acceptance rate on that. So we did that, and we did get picked up by a publisher, but some things sort of rang a little warning bell in my head as we went. Like, for one thing, they did want to make changes to the comic. Like, I think Mace dropped some potty words here and there. He's an orphan. He's kind of rough around the edges. So he was using some adult language, and they were like, "Oh no, let's tone that down." And I was like, "Well, I want this comic to be published. I really want to get this in front of readers. So I guess if it means trimming some language here and there, maybe we can do that. Maybe we can make that compromise if it's not that big of a deal." But another thing that they mentioned was early on when we signed and we were really excited, they were like, "Oh yeah, and don't expect to make a living off this or anything. That's not really how things work in the comic industry." And I kind of remember thinking, well, I don't expect to make a living off of it right away, but that's what I want to work towards. Of course, why wouldn't I want that? I think everybody wants to have the time they need to really invest like quality in the work that they're doing. And I wasn't expecting immediately the publisher to just like wipe my butt and provide a magical readership out of nowhere. But if they never saw a path towards growth and towards reaching a readership that might be able to support the ongoing work on the project, it's like, well, that's the path that I wanted to get on. So if the publisher wasn't able to see that and they didn't think that that was a realistic proposition, then that to me said they're not willing to put a lot of work into promoting this and marketing this. And that sort of leads into just a general conversation about traditional publishing in general. Because, I don't know, the world has changed a lot. The internet has changed a lot of things. And so I guess I'll just touch on that briefly. The traditional publishing model is pretty much you sign with the publisher, you give them 90% of the revenue from your books, like pretty much all of it. And originally, back in the olden days, a traditional publisher would guarantee that there was editorial polish and that your work was being presented at a professional level. And a traditional publisher would also have solid relationships with, distributors and bookstores, and they would put marketing out there and they would get customers for you. That was it. The traditional publishing model, if you went with them, they would get the book out there to the market effectively. It's like you made the stuff, and they took care of the business end and the sales. And if your stuff was good, it worked out. That's how it used to work. Things don't work like that anymore. Like not at all. I guess the way things work now is even if you sign with a traditional publisher, they usually want all the same stuff. They want the rights to your work. They want the licensing rights. They want 90% of the revenue. But on top of that, they make you, the author, responsible for marketing your own material. So it's like, okay, and then you just kind of think through that a little more, and eventually it turns into a situation where, they don't provide editorial polish, and they kind of want you to do everything. So if you as the author are making all the content, marketing all the content, gathering all the readers yourself, paying for your own way to go to conventions and all these things, managing sort of like the fulfillment and printing process and funding it up front with crowdfunding and stuff. Like if the author's doing literally every step of the whole process, it turns into a question where it's like, well, then why are you paying some other dude like 90% of the money for just like sitting there and slapping his logo on your book? So the traditional publishing model, it's just broken down. It doesn't make sense, mainly because I think traditional publishers can't offer the values and services that they used to be in a position to offer. The market's just not the same as it was. The comic market in particular has really there. That's a whole other video. I've written articles and articles about the problems in the comic market back in 2008, before it was a really popular topic. Um, but yeah, so those things, I didn't have my thoughts as clearly formed on that in 2006 as I do now, because I didn't have as much experience. But just the publisher telling me, "Oh, don't expect to make a living off of this ever," kind of got me thinking a little bit. And we were, actively marketing our stuff. I was getting it out there, trying to get it in front of people. Even if we were going, I went to an anime convention with no books to speak of, just a 3-ring binder with comic pages of Dreamkeepers Volume 1 that I had printed off of the printer and put into some page protectors. So that way, at least I was at a convention and I could show it to people and they could flip through it. And I started, collecting emails and people that would be interested in the book when it came out. And so I had people that were ready for Dreamkeepers Volume 1. They wanted to buy it. And then the publisher came out and he's like, "Oh, I know we were talking about publishing your book this summer. It's not going to work out. Maybe next summer. We'll maybe publish your book next summer." So then I was thinking, okay, the book's done. Volume 1 is done. And man, I got it done on a deadline too, because I forget why, but the publisher had a deadline for it. I guess back when it was supposed to be published in summer of 2006. And so I went bananas to get it finished in time for this deadline. I don't think I've ever worked that stupidly hard before. And I say stupidly hard because um, and I had to have like normal jobs on the side. I'll get to that in a minute, but I took time off from everything, so I was making no money at all, just like zero. I forget where I was getting food from. I guess maybe I wasn't eating that much, but just for a few days, I was going in overdrive, and I put this book together because I was on the last dozen or so pages. Um, so I think it was 3 or 4 solid days just with no sleep, getting this thing done on deadline. And I did it, got it done on deadline, submitted to the publisher, and immediately got probably the sickest that I've ever been. Because of course, if you're just burning yourself out like that, you're gonna have health problems. So for another week after that, I was recovering from some fevers and delirium and all sorts of fun stuff there. But so then to hit that deadline and be like, "Oh, I've did it. I've crossed the marathon finish line. Finally, the book is done and it'll be coming out. Thank goodness." And they have like literally like just nothing in my pocket, no resources. And then the publisher is like, "Yeah, maybe next year." At that point, I was like, "Well, wait a minute. If I've got people that want to buy my book now. The book is done. What am I waiting for?" I mean, and then I learned about print on demand, where you don't even need to have a big pile of money. You don't even need to have a giant offset print run. You can just print off like one copy of your book for, $18 and then sell it to somebody for $20. And, strictly speaking from a business standpoint, it's not the best profit margins in the world. It's kind of a really silly way to think that you're going to be making any money, but that wasn't really the priority at the time. I just really wanted people to read my book. So, did this thing? I'm just seeing if it's still recording. Yeah. So at the time, I just really wanted people to read my book, and so I contacted the publisher and I was like, "Hey, can we call this off and just go ahead and drop the agreement?" And fortunately, they were able to work with me, and so we just before we really got anything off the ground, we just terminated the agreement, and I went to a print-on-demand printer, and so that winter, I finally had my little stack of volume ones, and I had a group of like maybe what was it, like 50 people that pre-ordered volume 1 after I got that email list and started contacting people being like, "Hey, I got my book out. Would you want to get it now?" And I remember going to the post office like not right before Christmas. I think it was earlier in December than that. But I went there with this big armload of envelopes in back when I was living in Columbus, and the guy there looked so peeved that he had to do any work, and so we just sat down putting postage on these things, and I was so happy because I could see all these different addresses, and I was like, "Oh, my book is gonna be going over into Oregon, and oh my, one of my books is gonna go to Kansas, and one of my books, whoa, one of my books is going to France." And just seeing like Dreamkeepers books going into like a few like of these different places on the map, it made me feel excited because people were finally gonna read the thing that I'd been working so hard on. And so that was how we got started with volume 1, and that was how we got started with Vivid Publishing, because I was like, "Hey, if I'm gonna be publishing myself, I guess I should call myself a publishing company of some type." So I went ahead and got a little LLC for it and got a bank account, and that's how Vivid Publishing started, 2006. And we really did start quite literally with nothing. I know a lot of companies out there are running, and as soon as you kind of peel back the first layer on these companies, you look at them that they like to talk up a big game, but you look and it's like, oh, you've got a very nice trust fund that you've been living off of forever. Okay, or it's like, oh, you've got a spouse that's a lawyer and they pay for literally everything, and they're able to pump money into your company year after year to just cover operating costs. I mean, that's nice. It's nice if you have that. Or someone like, oh, you got a big inheritance. Like, there's a lot of these little, like, the landscape now, especially, it really seems like stuff has either gone super massive or kind of like small. Like, and by that I mean you got like Marvel is this gigantic established legacy corporation, and even now Marvel's owned by Disney, which is an even gianter, more established legacy corporation. You can almost argue that between Marvel, Disney, and Warner Brothers DC, it's almost like a corporate duopoly. It's effectively it's a monopoly, but I guess there's two of them, so you can't say that word. But anyway, so it's like it's either these massive, massive corporations or these really fragmented small little companies. And then you look at these small companies, and a lot of them, like more power to them, but they're not exactly sustaining themselves on the value of their own work. They're not really sustaining themselves on people that are purchasing stuff because it's good and they want to read it. It's almost more of like a hobby thing than anything else. Forget where I was going with that, but yeah. So Vivid Publishing, yeah, that's where I was going. Vivid Publishing. Obviously I didn't have a trust fund of any kind. I come from kind of a I wouldn't I guess I wouldn't say poor, but I don't know what else you would call it really background. But I went to college. The only way I was able to do that was I got some scholarships, luckily, which is kind of how they hook you into an art college. They give you a scholarship, and then you're like, oh, well, how could I refuse? The scholarship, of course, does not cover nearly the full tuition. So for that, it was college loans. And then I was able to feed myself and have a place to sleep in college because I applied for the resident advisor position. And I was an RA. And fortunately, when you're an RA, they let you stay in the dorms and they let you be on the school meal plan. So that's how I was able to feed myself in college. That, and I also had a side job that I worked in college because, I don't know. It just seemed like if I was able to do more work, that was probably a smart thing to do. I tried to do everything I could. But so I came out of college, of course, based on the art college you go to. Some of them might give you some good connections, and then some of them might be based in the Midwest, and they don't do that. So I didn't really have, there was no money at all, no trust funds, no giant private donors. I didn't marry like a wealthy lawyer that was footing the bill for anything. So literally Vivid Publishing started with I had a piece of paper and a pencil. That was it. And with piece of paper and pencil, I was able to make Dreamkeepers Volume 1, and then we, got it printed off with print on demand. And actually the way we even funded that first print on demand printing run was with my freelance work. Because right outside of college, initially I had it in my head, hey, I went to art college. I've got to make my living on art, otherwise that means I'm a failure. So initially, I applied to a little tiny local animation studio, and of course, I got in there, and I started hitting freelance as hard as I could, just doing all kinds of stuff, illustrations, other people's TV pitches, um, photo books for guys that were writing memoirs that nobody would read, not even their wife, like anything. I would just do everything in that area. Um, and freelance for the first year was really a grind because I had to do so much art that it made it very difficult to have creative focus on the comics that I wanted to be doing, because that's when I was also doing Dreamkeepers Volume 1. Um, I wonder if there's ever really a breaking point, but eventually the freelance it started to pick up and do better and better. I started to get larger clients, and it climaxed with I got a car dealership commercial where I was doing CG 3D animation for this car dealership, and it was paying pretty good. It was paying like orders of magnitude more than some of the other stuff I'd done. I mean, literally at points in that first year, I would work for food. I'd be like, "Oh yeah, I'll do these illustrations for you," and oh, you gave me a gigantic sack of stale bagels. That's great. I'm not going to starve. Thank you. So, but as soon as I got that car dealership animation job, that was pretty cool, but it also took a lot of work to do that, and I just realized if I keep on pursuing freelance like this, I'm not gonna have the energy left to work on Dreamkeepers. And what do I really want to do? Do I want to like do car dealership commercials forever? Not really. I want to do my own comics. So right around the time when Volume 1 was coming out, I think that's about the time that I quit doing freelance and actually just went full in on a normal job, a Joe job, I guess you could call it. And that wound up working pretty good for me. So I quit freelance. I was out of the animation studio, and what I did was apply. First, I had a little while where I was applied at a movie theater job, and so I was popping popcorn. And there was a fun scene where, literally, as I was manning the ticket booth, the dean of the art department of my art school came in, and so I sold him a ticket, and he recognized me right away. He's like, "Oh, oh," and I was like, "Oh yeah, how's it going? Here you go. Here's your ticket to the movie." And so I don't know. Like it wasn't embarrassing. It was just if anything, I was kind of like, it's like it was like part of me was like, this doesn't reflect well on you if you're trying to run an art college and you're selling kids on the idea that you're going to be, facilitating a career, and then there's absolutely no headhunters, no industry people ever coming into the school because those relationships were kind of destroyed. And then you're going around town, and like when you get your bagels and your movie ticket punched or whatever, it's all your former students. It's all art students everywhere. Like just you're living in like a town of failures that know you're responsible. It's so I don't know. That was kind of a surreal experience, but I fortunately was able to upgrade from the movie because that was minimum wage, and you don't want to be stuck at minimum wage if you can help it. So I upgraded and got a job as a security guard, and that turned out to be a really good move for Dreamkeepers in general. Because when I was a security guard, I was able to just go to work at a building, and I was working third shift, and all you had to do is pretty much you're just babysitting an empty building. There's no people in there. You just do your rounds, you sign off, and make sure there's not like a water pipe leaking somewhere causing water damage. And the rest of the time, it's just like downtime. There's no one around. So I was able to draw a lot of Dreamkeepers there. Now, granted, it wasn't completely perfect. You still had to deal with, oh man, it's amazing some of the things that a bad supervisor can cause. Like you'd think that just babysitting the building when there's nobody in there, that should be pretty simple and straightforward, but people will find ways to make anything complicated and ridiculous and silly and ineffective. So I have worked enough in the past that I knew it's like I don't really like having a boss because usually the boss is not good at what they do. It's just an unfortunate reality. But generally speaking, there were some growing pains, but it was a really good place to do Dreamkeepers. Still not quite optimal. Like for example, we were in the Midwest Ohio, and they would during the winter they would turn the heat off at night because it saved on money, and it's not like there was any important people in the building, just us. So they would turn off the heat at night, and here's an example of the supervisors kind of cracking down. The security guards, we would have like a little tiny space heater under that front desk where we had to sit all night, and that would keep us from freezing, and it was kind of nice, keep your legs a little bit warm. But then they decided, hey, you're supposed to be monitoring this building for safety reasons, and you're literally sitting right by the space heater. But what if you didn't notice and the space heater exploded in flames? What if you were not aware of that, and it just took the whole building down? So you guys, you're going to be in that building. We're going to turn the heat off. And oh, by the way, important note: no space heater for you. So, and I mean, most of the year it's fine because there's walls. It's not like the wind is cutting in there. But when it gets really cold, 20 degrees, maybe in the teens, it would be really cold inside. You bundle up in a big parka and stuff, but it's still chilly. So I mean, some scenes of Volume 2, I had to draw wearing like gloves to keep my fingers able to be warm enough to draw. So it wasn't exactly comfortable, but hey, it worked. I wasn't drained. I didn't have all of my artistic energy sapped away into freelance. So I was able to put just everything into Dreamkeepers and trying to push these books forward. And so that is exactly what I did. What are some other things? Oh, other fun stories along the way. At one point, running home from work, because I was at a security job, but I still had to get home, and sometimes me and Liz were both working at various points because we didn't have a lot of money. So since there was only one vehicle, one of us had to figure out a different way to go home. And I was like, you know what? She's farther away. I probably could use a little exercise anyways. So I would just make a habit of running home from my job site. And this was when I was at a job site that was about 2 miles away. And incidentally, the last time I was making that run, and I remember too, as I'm like running home, I was just remember thinking, I'm running home and I'm not walking home because if I can get home faster, I can draw a little bit more. Like every step I run, I'm running closer to a better future. I'm running closer to a future where I can just focus on creating my work and I can make more of it for the people that love it and it's going to be great. I just have to keep on going. And that's I guess that's kind of a recurring theme in all this is the phrase keep on going. So, yeah, I mean, so I would run home from work every day. One day it was this is actually the last time I made that run too. It was right before Volume 3 was released. I was making the run home, but it was after dark because of course it was also it wasn't exactly raining. It was sort of like a slushy rain because it was winter, but there was rain coming down and it was frozen and gritty. And I mean, I say this because visibility must have been absolutely garbage for the motorists. The route that I would run home was right along Main Street. This is like the busiest street in downtown Columbus. So this is a this is a busy street, and there's headlights, flying all along it. And so as I'm going down the sidewalk, when it passes when it crosses a side street, I was kind of thinking in the back of my mind on this whole run too. It's like, oh, if anyone's going to be turning left and flying in here, I'll have to be careful. Well, somebody decided to turn left and fly in there, and they're turning left, so they have to zip in between oncoming cars, and they're cutting it close. So they really gunned it and turned left, and I saw these headlights just swinging towards me through the sleet, and I thought, okay, we got a choice. There's no way in hell I was able to like dodge forward or back because I'm mid stride, so it's just going to be over or under. And so I tried to make sure it was over. I like jumped up as much as I could when my foot was on the ground, and fortunately, uh, yeah, fortunately it was not under because that would have been bad. But so the truck hit me, caught me low on the hip, threw me about 20 feet, and I rolled to a stop on the concrete. Which actually it wasn't too bad because I think I was wearing a backpack that had my change of clothing because you can't be running to work and then having a sweaty, gross uniform on. So I had to change in and out of running clothes when I'm going to work and stuff. So I think the backpack took most of that friction from the pavement. So that was what really saved me. And then of course, the lady jumped out of the truck, and it was and I was laying there on the concrete, and at first I did not know. I was like, well, nothing hurts too bad right now. Let's see what happens when I try to stand up. So I very gingerly kind of put my hands on the concrete and pushed up and got a couple of legs under me. And yeah, I stood up and I was like, okay, let's make sure the joints aren't all fucked up. So I like tried lifting this leg up and the other leg up, and there was no weird sharp pain or anything. I just felt a little rattled. So I told her, hey, yeah, I think I'm okay. I think we're good. Her truck was not okay. There was a big fucking dent in the hood. So I was like, oh shit, I hope she doesn't see that. And so she was freaking out and being like, oh no, no, are you okay? I feel so bad. And so I was just like, oh, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. And just, drive safe, and I hope you have a nice night, and nothing, it's all gonna be cool. And so she got back in her truck and she was all right. And she drove off, and I just kept on going home. And I started walking, but I was like, you know what? I'm walking back. I don't have a big thigh muscle, so no serious injury at all. And after like a few minutes, I was like, you know what? I'm feeling good. I can go back to jogging and I can get some more drawing done. So that's what just kept on running home, and getting hit by a truck was not fortunately it was not enough to slow me down that day. And ironically, that was the last time I had to run home from work because the Volume 3 pre-orders came through. And this was before there was such a thing as Kickstarter. This was before there was such a thing as like Indiegogo or those platforms, before Patreon. So the pre-orders, I was just doing all of this manually. I would like make a PayPal button with my PayPal account, put it on the Dreamkeepers comic website, and when pre-orders were open, I'd be like, "Hey, everybody, here's where pre-orders are. You can pre-order with this PayPal button." And Volume 3, every book we got more and more orders. Volume 1 was like maybe 50. Volume 2 was 176, I want to say. Volume 3 got up to over 400 orders, and 453 some orders was enough that I actually was able to do an offset print run. I think Volume 3 was the first book where I had an offset print run, and that allowed us to finally have some actual profit from it. Because previously, if you print off a book on demand, the cost per unit is pretty high, and so you're it's almost I almost thought of it sometimes as like I'm trying to build a business that operates here. I'm trying to build something that can sustain itself. But with these profit margins, it's like trying to build a log cabin and all you've got is toothpicks. It was just time consuming and grueling, and like every single scrap of anything the Dreamkeepers made, I put it right back into Vivid because at that time I was a security guard. Me and Liz were working jobs, and the jobs were able to kind of pay the bills and keep us in food. So anything Dreamkeepers made, I was like, I need this to grow, and the only way it's going to grow is if I keep on reinvesting in it. So I'd get a little bit for banner ads here, maybe a little bit for some convention travel and expenses there. But yeah, every little bit we could make, but it was still, those profit margins were so tiny with print on demand books, and I really did think of it like I'm trying to build a log cabin with toothpicks here. But finally, Volume 3, we had enough customers, like a few hundred customers ordering, that I was able to do an offset print run, and suddenly it's kind of like the world just opened up a little bit. We actually had a good chunk of profit after that, and I was able to finally stop doing the security guard thing. I wasn't able to buy a lot of time, but I was like, you know what, this is enough that I think I can try to run on Volume 4, and we'll see how far I can get with that. And it also helped that after Volume 3 came out, so I had a little profit from that, and then Prelude came out, because Prelude was the prequel webcomic. I forget, during this time, like, yes, I was working on Dreamkeepers, the graphic novel saga, but we were doing a second comic on the side. And this second comic was the same characters from the graphic novels, but it's kind of like their childhood. I would say the thing I thought of was, if you're familiar with the Muppet Show, then there's Muppet Babies, which is when the characters were little kids. And so Prelude is kind of like when all the Dreamkeepers characters were little kids, before the nightmares came, before people were getting eaten and all that horrible stuff was happening. So Prelude was kind of like a little more lighthearted, a little more directly in the vein of Calvin and Hobbes, which is one of my biggest influences, I think. So, but yeah, we'd been doing the graphic novel saga and a free Prelude webcomic on the side. And so I think the year after Volume 3 launched, that's when we finally had enough Prelude comics to do Prelude Collection 1. And I think that's our first Kickstarter, because I think at that point Kickstarter was finally starting to become a thing. And with Prelude Collection 1, that was another offset book run. And it was really kind of off to the races at that point. Um, and that's when we had our next little challenge pop up, which was we had Volume 3 offset print, and I was feeling great because we finally had books with good profit margins, and we had the Prelude Collection 1 print run with soft covers and hard covers, so I was really excited about that. And that is right when we had an apartment fire that just destroyed literally everything. Fortunately, me and Liz were out of town at the time. We were going to like a family wedding thing. So, and I say fortunately because that meant we were able to have our driver's licenses. We were able to have a change of clothes. We had like toothbrushes. So really, I mean, it's kind of the stuff that you really needed to have. But everything else that was still in that building, the morning we left, like a few hours later, the fire department doesn't even know what caused it. They had an investigation. It's really kind of a fun little side story there. Like, if you look at the apartment complex building, it's like a 3-story building. The unit where the fire started on the third floor, like the bricks were like exploded out the side of it. It looked like there was some kind of a detonation or something. I'm no expert. There was a lot of rumors going around that some of the other residents had a meth lab that exploded, and I don't know if that's true, but if that was true, it probably would have interfered with their insurance claim. And if that was true, then there probably would have been a lot of incentive to get the fire department's inspector to conclude that something else was the cause. So they did a big giant investigation, and they concluded the cause was dot 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 candles. So I don't know that much about arson investigation, but I don't think it's a really successful investigation if their conclusion is, well, we think the fire might have been caused by a smaller fire. It's like, okay, that's informative. Good job, guys. But regardless, like, unfortunately, I'm a pretty heavy sleeper when I sleep, so I don't even know if I would have made it out of that if I was there. But we were gone, we were safe, we had a change of clothes, but the whole building was written off as a loss. They wouldn't even let salvage teams go in to check for stuff because the state determined that it was too hazardous to let people return into the building. I think there's footage of it up on YouTube somewhere, but I mean, it was just like the whole roof was pretty much taken off. There was flame and smoke and the whole 9 yards. So, but that means that apartment was the only little space in the world that we had. So all of our book runs from Vivid Publishing, it was all just destroyed. The volume 3s were destroyed. Our little inventory of print on demand volume 1s and 2s, those were gone. The whole run of the Prelude collection stuff. Fortunately, we had already fulfilled to the backers, but all of that leftover inventory, which is where a lot of the profit went, because we were like, hey, this way we have these books and we can sell them at future conventions and we can have a little bit more profit and that'll be good. So yeah, all of that was just literally toast, gone up in flames. So that was another big setback, but we kept on going. Again, kind of like getting hit with the truck, bounced off. If you can keep going, then keep going. And after that, we were fortunately we were able to keep on building stuff. I think the thing that really saved it is I didn't lose. I lost almost no progress on volume 4. I mean, I did lose all of the original art. All of the original art I'd ever made was gone after that. But I didn't lose the actual like scans because fortunately we were backing up all of our work on an offsite backup. I think we were using Carbonite. If we hadn't been doing that, like, it doesn't matter how many spare hard drives we had in the closet, those were gone too. So fortunately, everything was backed up, and I was able to just keep on going forward on volume 4. And then thanks to the readers, thanks to you guys, volume 4 was our most successful book release after that to date. We had, I think, double the backers from volume 3. It was quite fantastic and incredible. And volume 4, it really restored us. It kind of brought us back to life in terms of Vivid Publishing and our ability to do stuff. And then from there, there's been so many just awesome people that have been like pulled into like the series. And we had someone contributing a soundtrack. Nicholas Albrecht made a custom soundtrack for the series. We had guys coming in to help us, and so we have Skirmish, which is the Dreamkeepers tabletop game adaptation that was developed for the series. Geo came in and wrote a novel about his own character, Wayward Astronomer, like a whole spin-off novel that took place in the series, and that was really fun. So just since then, there's been some bumps in the road, but we keep on making stuff. And you guys, the readership, it just always surprises me with how supportive and awesome and engaged, and just, you guys are just really great, and I'm grateful that we're able to keep on doing this. And it's my favorite thing to do. So I guess, as you can probably see from the topic of this speed paint video, we are now working on volume 5. And volume 5, it's been a long time coming, just because it did take a ton of artwork to put into Skirmish. I wanted the game to be something, really beautiful and memorable. And I also stopped and did, full illustrations for the Wayward Astronomer novel. So the Wayward Astronomer is also a fully illustrated novel. We made a strategy guide for Skirmish. So we've been releasing stuff pretty consistently, but it's just, we've spread out to the point where volume 5 has been a long time coming, but it's finally here, and we're finally launching it on Indiegogo. So I am just really excited. I'm excited to be bringing you guys another Dreamkeepers book. And this one, we're upgrading the format. I probably mentioned it in my last snippet of audio, but I forget because it was a while ago. We needed more audio to round out the speed paint here. But yeah, it's the biggest graphic novel we've made to date. We're upgrading the format. It's going to be hardcover. We're going to try to get some foil stamps and bevel, emboss, and spot UV. I'm really excited. It's going to be a beautiful book. Plus, we've got some figurines for this campaign that Tari modeled the indigos, and the 3D prints came out so good. I hope we can do justice when we do the resin silicone casting. That's coming up pretty soon. Talenshi is making actual guide coins for this campaign. And also, one of the other things too, we've been working on this since about 2011, just on the back burner, but we do have a video game in the works for Dreamkeepers using a custom engine, like the whole 9 yards. And I have some animation for Mace, like I've got playable animation for Mace, and we don't really have the resources at this point, but I would really like to unlock playable animation for Bast and Nama too. So we have those as stretch goals way up in this campaign. So yeah, it has been a long journey. We've been through a lot, but we are doing what we love to do more than anything in the world, and we're really excited for anyone that wants to be along for the ride. And we're going to make some cool stuff for you. So if you get a chance, fly on over to Indiegogo, check out the Dreamkeepers Volume 5 campaign. And in this campaign, again, you can get the volumes 1 through 4 omnibus and be totally caught up with our hardcover, glorious, triumphant, awesome, fun time. So I hope you're having a fantastic evening. Go over, check out that campaign, and we will talk to you later.